What if I told you that the four horsemen of the apocalypse weren't, monsters?
Right.
Like they weren't zombies, and they weren't even just some ethereal, poetic metaphor for good and evil. What if they were actually a highly precise mathematical blueprint of macroeconomic collapse?
I mean, it completely shatters how we normally read ancient texts. We are so used to uh, safely cordoning off religious or apocalyptic writings into the realm of personal morality.
Yeah, totally.
We see a beast or a horseman, we think, okay, that's an allegory for being a good person or bad person. But the framework we're looking at today argues that these texts are rigorously, unapologetically mathematical.
It is the absolute definition of an intellectual paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking you through a truly fascinating piece of source material.
Oh, it's wild.
It really is. We have this highly detailed academic and ministerial syllabus. It's titled Economics 101 in Bible. And it's issued under the ecclesiastical authority of an organization called the Children of Man, the Ministry.
Which operates under the Delaware State of the Union, right?
Exactly. And their official motto really sets the tone for this whole document, I think. It's Veritas, Libertas, Fiducia. Truth, liberty, trust.
Yeah, the core premise of this syllabus is what makes it so arresting. The authors argue that ancient biblical prophecies, specifically the apocalyptic visions in Revelation and Ezekiel, along with the civil laws in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, aren't just spiritual guidelines.
Right.
They assert that these texts are actually rigorous macroeconomic blueprints. I mean, they are describing the literal mechanics of how massive empires extract wealth and, well, how those empires inevitably mathematically collapse.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the syllabus presents human economic history not just as a random series of events, but as this irreconcilable clash between two very specific foundational systems.
Yeah, the text frames it as a war between two operating systems, basically.
Right.
On one side, you have what the syllabus calls the extractive imperial paradigm.
The extractive model.
Right. Historically, the text models this on the ancient maritime empire of Tyre, the system of Babylon, and it explicitly links these ancient models to the modern British system of free trade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the DNA of this system is driven by wholesale speculation, financial transfer, and currency leverage. It's an economy based on, moving wealth around and skimming from the top rather than actually creating it.
Right. Paper shuffling and the opposing operating system.
That is the sovereign covenantal paradigm.
Okay.
This is a productive commonwealth model. In modern historical terms, the syllabus likens this to the American system of political economy.
Which is, for you listening, if you want a historical anchor for that, think of the economic philosophies championed by Alexander Hamilton in his Report on Manufactures.
Exactly. Or Abraham Lincoln's primary economic advisor, Henry C. Carey, or even the German economist Friedrich List.
So instead of speculation and skimming, that system focuses on what? Making tangible things.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, yes. It focuses on physical production, domestic manufacturing, protective tariffs, and this is crucial, maintaining a high-wage economy.
High wages, right.
The whole goal of the covenantal model is to protect the dignity of labor, to ensure that a nation produces actual physical wealth rather than just, shuffling paper assets around.
Now, before we get too far into the weeds here, quick heads up for you listening.
Yes, good point.
The text we're exploring today heavily critiques specific modern and historical political economies, like the British free trade system, and it holds up others, like the American system of Hamiltonian economics, as the antidote.
Right.
But for this deep dive, we are remaining strictly impartial. We're not taking political sides, and we are not endorsing one economic model over the other. We're merely exploring the fascinating, intricate architectural framework of the provided syllabus.
Exactly.
Our mission is simply to understand the mechanics of the argument the text is making.
And it is a deeply structured argument. I mean, the authors don't just pull these ideas out of thin air. The syllabus draws heavily on the structural and linguistic annotations of E.W. Bullinger's Companion Bible.
Specifically focusing on the authorized version of 1611, right?
Yes. They dig into the exact Hebrew and Greek definitions to map out the blueprint of imperial economics. It's really granular.
So let's get into the mechanics of that blueprint. The syllabus uses Revelation chapter 6, the famous four horsemen, as the step-by-step manual for how an extractive empire operates.
Right, the sequential phases.
Yeah. If I am an empire and I want to extract the wealth of sovereign nations, how does the text say I start?
Well, you start with the first seal, the white horse.
Okay.
The rider of the white horse is given a crown, and he carries a bow, but crucially, he has no arrows.
A bow without arrows. That feels like a very specific detail. I mean, if I have a weapon with no ammunition, I'm not shooting anyone.
Exactly.
I'm just holding it up to look intimidating. And the syllabus calls this phase hegemonic deception, right?
Because the initial phase of an extractive empire's expansion is rarely a kinetic, bloody military invasion. It's soft power conquest.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's financial and administrative. The bow without arrows symbolizes expansion without physical, productive backing. You are conquering through unbacked financial treaties, legal fictions, and the expansion of unipolar credit systems.
Unipolar credit systems. Let's translate that for a second. We're talking about a system where one single central empire dictates the rules of the currency, right?
Absolutely.
Like you want to trade in the global market, you have to use our money, play by our banking rules, and sign our treaties.
That is the essence of it. And the text uses a very specific Greek word from Revelation 18 to describe how this is achieved. The word is pharmakeia.
Wait, pharmakeia.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember my Sunday school lessons, that usually gets translated into English as sorceries. Are we talking about literal magic here?
Well, no, not magical sorcery in the way we think of like wizards and spells.
Okay, good.
In this macroeconomic context, Bullinger's notes and the syllabus define pharmakeia as systemic deception or smell-binding legal fictions.
Spellbinding legal fictions. I like that phrase.
Yeah, it refers to the fraudulent financial narratives that convince a sovereign nation to willingly submit to debt bondage and colonial trade policies.
I see. It's the sleight of hand.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of makes me think of signing a predatory terms of service agreement when you download an app.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
You know the drill? You scroll past 40 pages of dense legal jargon. You click agree because it looks like a standard, harmless legal document. It's a soft power move.
Right. You don't even think about it.
But buried in the fine print, you've essentially signed away the rights to all your digital data. You surrendered your digital sovereignty without a single shot being fired. The syllabus is arguing that nations do this on a macroeconomic scale.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. A developing nation willingly accepts massive unbacked credit loans. They sign unipolar trade treaties because the pharmakeia, the legalistic spell cast by the empire's financial architects, convinces them it is the only path to modernization and prosperity.
Wow.
It is the illusion of wealth created by paper or digital credit.
But the fine print is a trap.
Exactly. The fine print structurally surrenders their sovereign resources. The local producers are slowly replaced by wholesale foreign cartels.
Because they have to pay back the loans.
Right. The nation's physical wealth, their timber, their minerals, their agriculture, is funneled to a centralized financial hub to pay off the interest on a loan that was printed out of thin air.
Okay, so if the first phase is just paperwork and soft power legal contracts, what happens when a country finally wakes up? Like what happens when a sovereign nation realizes the math is rigged, the debt is unpayable, and they try to rip up the contract and back out? The empire isn't just going to let them cancel the subscription.
They absolutely will not. And that logical consequence triggers the second seal, the red horse.
The red horse.
We transition from soft power to kinetic power. The rider of the red horse is given a great sword and the power to take peace from the earth.
The syllabus frames this as militarized enforcement. But why does the financial empire suddenly need a great sword? I mean, if they're so powerful with their banking treaties, why resort to violence?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about protecting the monopoly. As the unbacked credit bubble expands during the White Horse phase, the empire eventually realizes it has to physically defend its financial architecture.
Oh, I see.
You can't enforce a global terms of service agreement without a global police force.
So the sword is there to guard the banking system.
Yes. The empire has to secure exclusive currency clearing zones. They have to protect the physical raw material pipelines they've acquired through debt traps, and they must guard their colonial trade routes.
Because if the trade routes fall, the whole financial illusion falls apart.
Precisely. Financial hegemony ultimately requires armed militarization. The syllabus calls this the phase of forever wars.
Forever wars.
The empire must use geopolitical force to crush any sovereign bilateral trade resistance that might threaten its unipolar currency dominance.
It's basically the enforcer for the cartel, the kings of the earth acting as the military arm to protect the merchant class.
Exactly.
But here's where the syllabus really takes a fascinating turn. Because the Red Horse's military enforcement paves the way for the empire's ultimate weapon of control. And surprisingly, the ultimate weapon isn't a military one at all.
No, the ultimate weapon is purely economic. We are talking about the third seal, the the black horse.
The rider of the black horse doesn't carry a sword. He doesn't carry a bow. He carries a pair of balances, a scale.
Right.
Now, usually when we see scales on a courthouse or a statue of Lady Justice, it's a symbol of fairness, right? A free and equitable market.
In a covenantal system, yes. But in the extractive system, the Greek word used for those balances is zygos, and this is a crucial linguistic distinction.
Okay, what does zygos mean?
Zygos literally translates to a yoke, like a heavy wooden yoke you would strap onto an ox or a beast of burden to force it to plow a field.
So the scale isn't about fairness at all. It's an instrument of subjugation.
Completely. It represents commercial servitude and agricultural bondage. The balance here is an instrument of institutional fraud, managed scarcity, and aggressive price fixing.
Wow.
The syllabus references other biblical prophets like Hosea and Amos, who talk about merchants making the ephah small and the shekel great, meaning they falsify the balances by deceit.
So in plain English, they're manipulating the weights, they are tinkering with the currency and the supply chain to artificially extract profit from the middle. Arbitrage.
Yes.
And the rider of the black horse makes a very specific, terrifying decree that lays out exactly how this yoke operates. He says, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny.
The syllabus calls this the denarius trap, and the mathematics behind it are chillingly precise. Let's look at the Greek words used in that decree.
Okay, let's break it down.
The word for measure is choinix. In the ancient world, a choinix was roughly a single person's basic daily food ration.
Oh.
It is just enough grain, just enough physical calories to keep one human being alive for one day.
So 1 day's worth of food and the price.
The word for penny is denarius. A denarius was the standard full day's wage for an ordinary physical laborer, an agricultural worker, or a foot soldier.
Wait, really? So full day's wage for a single daily ration of food. The math is a 1-to-1 ratio.
It is the mathematics of forced subsistence. The monopoly engineers hyperinflation on foundational sustenance.
Oh my God.
They squeeze the supply chain so tightly that a worker must expend 100% of their daily productive energy purely to acquire the physical fuel, the food required to wake up and perform that exact same labor again the next day.
Here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a little too relatable. Think about modern hustle culture for you listening.
Yeah.
You hear stories all the time about people working a full-time job, plus driving for a ride-share app, plus doing freelance work on the weekends, and at the end of the month, their entire income is completely evaporated by rent, basic utilities, and a trip to the grocery store.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It's like a treadmill where the speed keeps increasing, but you never actually move forward.
Exactly. Because your entire wage is consumed by bare survival, the system leaves you with zero surplus capital. You cannot save. You cannot invest in independent development or land.
You can't even get ahead.
You can't even easily support a family because your 12 hours of labor only earned enough bread for yourself. The physical labor of the people is entirely trapped in a closed loop of mere existence.
The yoke of the black horse. It's designed to ensure the working population can never accumulate enough capital to challenge the monopoly.
But what makes the black horse economy truly insidious isn't just the poverty of the masses. It is the second half of the writer's decree.
Right, there's more to that quote.
The full quote is, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine."
Hurt not the oil and the wine. Okay, I'm stuck on this idea. Why specifically oil and wine? What's the economic value of those 2 items in this context?
This reveals the dual standard economy of the extractive empire. While the basic dietary staples, the wheat and the barley, the things ordinary people need to survive, are subjected to extreme poverty pricing and rationing, the higher order assets are legally insulated.
Insulated how?
Well, the Greek word for oil is aleon. In the physical economy of the ancient world, and still very much today, oil represents the primary energy resource. It's the vital fuel for lamps, the machinery lubrication, the foundational raw industrial asset.
And the wine.
The wine, oinos, represents elite liquid capital assets. It symbolizes high-value land rents, the luxury estates, the financialized wealth of the ruling merchant class.
So the decree is basically saying, squeeze the peasants until they bleed, hyperinflate their bread, but do not touch the energy monopolies and the elite financial portfolios. The assets of the rich are ring-fenced.
Absolutely. The agricultural productive layer is squeezed to starve the direct producer. But the foundational extraction rights and the financialized assets are protected by the institutional framework.
Because they wrote the rules.
Right. Because the masses have zero surplus capital, the wealth generated by their daily physical labor is systematically siphoned upward into centralized banking and merchant hubs.
Wow.
The system guarantees that the ruling commercial class remains secure and in total control of the economy's lifelines, even as the broader population is pushed to the brink of starvation.
It's an incredibly bleak picture. And what is wild is that the syllabus doesn't just leave this as an ancient metaphor about Roman soldiers and wheat. It draws a direct structural line from these ancient models to modern global monopolies.
Yes, to understand this structural continuity, the syllabus directs us to the ultimate archetype of maritime monopolies in the biblical text.
Which is?
The ancient island city of Tyre, as described in Ezekiel chapters 27 and 28.
Tyre is presented as the master blueprint for global maritime hegemony. Ezekiel describes the city not just as a place, but he uses this beautiful, haunting metaphor of Tyre as a colossal, brilliantly constructed ship built from the resources of all the surrounding nations.
Right, they took cedar from Lebanon, oak from Bashan, ivory from Cyprus.
They just extracted everything from everywhere else.
And E.W. Bullinger's linguistic notes highlight something critical about the reality of Tyre's economy. Tyre didn't actually produce anything domestically.
Wait, really?
They didn't manufacture their own goods, and they didn't grow their own primary wealth on a massive scale. Instead, they consumed raw resources from other sovereign nations, and they monopolized the global freight and shipping lines.
The syllabus uses a specific Hebrew word for this type of economy, doesn't it? Rakula.
Rakula occurs repeatedly in Ezekiel's judgment of Tyre. It denotes circulating trade, speculative wholesale trafficking, and financial brokerage. It is the exact opposite of honest domestic industry.
Okay, so it's just moving things around.
Rakula is the act of positioning yourself in the middle, extracting from all the producers and brokering to all the consumers, taking a speculative cut without adding any physical value to the product itself.
So they are the ultimate middlemen. They just own the toll bridges and the shipping lanes.
And Ezekiel connects Rakula directly to another Hebrew word, chamas,
which translates to violence.
Ezekiel says to the prince of Tyre, "By the multitude of thy merchandise, thy Rakula, they have filled the midst of thee with violence chamas."
Wow, so the trade itself is violence.
The syllabus argues that systemic accumulation of capital via unbacked trade and financial coercion isn't just shrewd business. It is defined in Scripture as literal institutional violence against sovereign nations. When you artificially starve a population to protect your profit margins, that is chamas.
And this system is run by a very specific class of people. In Revelation 18, which is the New Testament echo of this Tyre prophecy, the text talks about the merchants of the earth.
The Greek word used there is emperoi. Bullinger makes a very sharp distinction here that we need to understand. Emperoi does not mean a local craftsman.
It's not the guy baking the bread.
Exactly. It doesn't mean a domestic producer, a farmer, or a neighborhood market seller. Those people were called kapaloi. Emperoi strictly denotes wholesale foreign traders, the speculators, the merchant oligarchs.
The ones controlling the choke points.
Yes. Revelation says these emperoi were the great men of the earth whose monopoly control and pharmakia effectively replaced sovereign local governance.
Okay, so the syllabus takes this ancient archetype of Tyre, the emperor controlling the Recula, and it contrasts it with a massive modern example. The Anglo-American oil monopoly, historically known as the Seven Sisters.
For context, the Seven Sisters were a consortium of massive Western oil companies that almost entirely dominated the global petroleum industry from the mid-20th century until the oil crisis in the 1970s.
They were practically a cartel.
They acted very much like the maritime cartel of ancient Tyre. They controlled the extraction, they owned the shipping choke points, and they dictated the pricing of the vital fuel, the elaine, the oil.
They held the black horse's balances over the global energy supply. But the syllabus provides a fascinating historical case study of resistance to this modern monopoly. A man named Enrico Mattei in post-war Italy. I really want to spend a minute on him because his story plays out like an economic spy thriller.
Enrico Mattei is a perfect historical parallel for how the sovereign covenantal resistance actually operates in the real world. Let's set the stage.
Okay, walk us through it.
After World War II, Italy's economy was devastated. They were heavily reliant on foreign energy, and they were completely at the mercy of the Seven Sisters cartel. Mattei was a former partisan fighter, and the Italian government tasked him with a very specific job: dismantle the Italian State Petroleum Agency, AGIP, and basically sell off the scraps.
But he doesn't do that.
No, he looks at the landscape, realizes that submitting to the cartel will keep Italy perpetually subjugated, and he goes rogue. Instead of liquidating the state agency, he enlarges it. He reorganizes it into a massive independent state refiner called ENI.
He essentially looked at the Emperor of the Seven Sisters cartel and said, we aren't playing by your rules. We aren't going to be your colonial outpost. But how exactly did he bypass them? Because they controlled the entire global market, right?
He bypassed them by refusing to use their financial architecture. Mattei bypassed the unipolar dollar clearing systems that the cartel controlled. Instead, he engaged in direct bilateral infrastructure barter with producing nations.
Barter, like trading goods directly without using the empire's money.
Exactly. He flew to countries like Iran, Egypt, and even the USSR during the height of the Cold War.
Oh, wow. He went straight to the source.
Yeah, and the Seven Sisters were offering these nations terrible concession terms, basically taking their oil and giving them pennies on the dollar. Mattei offered a revolutionary 75-25 profit split in favor of the producing nations.
A 7-5-25 split. That's unheard of.
And he offered them domestic infrastructure development. He said, you give Italy the raw energy, and Italian engineers will build your sovereign pipelines, your roads, and your local refineries.
He bypassed the red and black horse systems entirely. He didn't use their military-backed currency zones, and he didn't submit to their price-fixing yoke. He just traded physical value for physical value. It's brilliant.
And by doing so, he broke the monopoly's grip on Italy's energy supply. This influx of affordable, sovereign energy fueled the massive Italian economic miracle of the 1950s and 60s. He secured the oil for the sovereign development of his own nation, rather than letting it be siphoned off by the emperor.
I have to point out, though, doing that is incredibly dangerous to an empire. You are directly threatening the core mechanism of their wealth extraction. You're cutting the toll collector out of the loop.
Extremely dangerous.
And tragically, Mattei died in a very suspicious plane crash in 1962. It's a crash that historians and journalists still debate today, with strong suspicions of sabotage. It really underscores the violence, the shamas, that the text warns about when you challenge the Ricola. The empire doesn't just let you walk away from the table.
Which brings up a vital question about the mechanics of the system. We've talked about the military swords and the shady plane crashes, but the empire doesn't solely rely on brute force. It relies on specific daily financial mechanics to drain productivity. How does the extraction happen on a mathematical level on a random Tuesday?
Right. And here's where I want to challenge the premise of the syllabus a bit, because it gets into some very common financial practices. The text identifies two specific mathematical levers used to subordinate labor and resources: Neshak and Tarbit. Now, in modern terms, these basically translate to charging interest on a loan and marking up the price of a commodity for profit. Interest and price markups are the basic foundational pillars of modern global finance. I mean, if I get a mortgage, I pay interest. If I buy an apple at the store, I know the store marked up the price from what they paid the farmer. Why does the source text frame these everyday practices as apocalyptic weapons?
That is the core friction of this entire deep dive. To understand why the biblical framework outlaws them, we have to look at the exact etymology of the words and the systemic long-term effect of these two levers. Let's start with Neshak.
Okay, the Hebrew root for Neshak means a bite, right?
Yes, specifically to bite like a serpent. Neshak represents direct compounding interest charged upfront or over time on money lent.
Like a snake bite.
The reason the covenantal system views it as an extractive weapon isn't just about moral greed. It's due to the nature of compounding mathematics versus physical reality.
Let's break down that math. Make it real for me.
Think about the physical world: agriculture, manufacturing, human labor. In the physical world, growth is organic and linear. Let's say you are a farmer, you have a plot of land. You can only grow so much wheat on that acre in a given year.
Even with good weather.
Exactly. Even with good weather and hard work, your yield increases linearly. A factory can only produce so many goods based on its physical capacity and the hours its workers can physically stand on the assembly line.
Okay, physical reality has limits.
But Neshak compounding interest is not bound by physical reality. It grows exponentially. It is an abstract mathematical curve that accelerates over time.
Okay, let's say I loan that farmer the equivalent of 100 bags of wheat, but I charge him a 10% compounding interest rate. Mathematically, that debt is going to double every 7 years or so. But the farmer's physical plot of land physically cannot yield double the wheat every 7 years.
Right. The soil has limits. The sun only shines so many hours a day. The math is infinite. The soil is finite.
That is the serpent's bite.
Yes. If you attach an exponential interest obligation to a physically limited, linearly growing asset, the debt will inevitably, mathematically outgrow the underlying physical asset. Neshak acts as a direct drain on capital. It progressively consumes the borrower's physical substance because the debt grows faster than their ability to produce real value.
Wow. So eventually the math demands more wheat than the earth can possibly grow.
Precisely. This is the exact mechanism that drives the white horse phase, the unbacked credit expansion. And because the math guarantees that the debt will eventually exceed the physical carrying capacity of the real economy, Neshak guarantees eventual systemic default.
The serpent's bite is slow at first, you hardly feel it, but it eventually consumes your entire livelihood. So that is Neshak attacking capital and the money supply. But the empire has a second lever, Tarbit.
Tarbit, which is often paired with the word marbit in the text, translates to an increase or multiplication. But it operates quite differently than Neshak. It's not direct interest on a cash loan. It is speculative arbitrage.
The syllabus defines it as the speculative price markup on physical commodities, staples, or food, specifically when delivered on credit or hoarded to exploit scarcity.
While Neshak attacks a nation's capital, Tarbit directly attacks physical consumption and basic human survival. It denotes unjust gain derived not from physical labor and not from value-added refinement, but purely from the passage of time or the manipulation of scarcity.
Think about the last time you went to the grocery store. For you listening, you walk into the aisle, you look at the price of eggs or a loaf of bread, and you realize the price has doubled in the last year. Now, the farmer didn't get paid double, the trucker didn't get paid double.
Right, the productive class didn't see that money.
The text argues this isn't just an invisible hand of inflation, it is Tarbit. It is a structural weapon used by the middlemen to extract profit from the fact that you literally have to eat to survive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Tarbit is the exact mathematical engine that powers the black horse. It's the mechanism behind the denarius trap.
Oh, wow. I see it.
By utilizing Tarbit charging speculative increases on basic food and energy staples, especially when the population is forced to buy them on credit, the monopolists artificially inflate the cost of living. They suppress labor productivity because, as we discussed with the black horse, 100% of a worker's wages are consumed by the inflated cost of bare survival.
It's a devastating 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
I mean, Neshak drains your capital and forces you into debt just to keep your business running. And Tarbit inflates the cost of your food and fuel so you have no disposable income left to ever pay the borrowing back. You are trapped.
Completely trapped. The syllabus notes that by strictly prohibiting both Neshak and Tarbit in the civil statutes of Leviticus 25, the Mosaic law was attempting to establish a protective circuit breaker. The covenantal model was trying to ensure that capital served physical production rather than acting as a parasitic extraction tool.
So what happens when an empire ignores those circuit breakers? What happens when Neshak and Tarbit are allowed to run completely unchecked for decades? When you never stop biting the capital and marking up the food, expanding the debt bubble and squeezing the labor force indefinitely?
That brings us to the fourth seal, the pale horse.
The rider is death, and Hades the grave follows closely with him. It's the ultimate biblical symbol of systemic collapse.
And the authors of the syllabus argue that this isn't just religious doomsaying, it is a mathematical certainty.
A mathematical certainty.
The pale horse represents the threshold where unbacked exponential debt claims fueled by the infinite curve of Neshak completely outgrow the real carrying capacity of the physical economy.
You can't squeeze blood from a stone. And you can't extract more wealth from a population than the physical earth and human labor can actually produce. When the math demands 10 tons of wheat, but the earth can only grow 5, something has to break.
When the financial abstraction eclipses physical reality, the system snaps. The result is mass financial default. Supply chains break down because the speculative credit required to run them simply evaporates. Physical infrastructure fails because no one is investing in maintenance, only in debt servicing. And, tragically, demographic contraction occurs. Starvation, crisis, and death.
It's Ezekiel's prophecy of Tyre coming true. He describes this massive, beautiful galleon loaded with all the world's wealth, rowed out into great waters. The system is so top-heavy with speculative debt, so reliant on Recula, that a single macroeconomic shock, an east wind, breaks the ship in the midst of the seas.
The freight, the mariners, the pilots, the entire commercial superstructure collapses simultaneously. The pale horse is the inevitable terminal end state of the extractive model. It is a system designed to consume its host, and once the host is consumed, the parasite stops as well.
Okay, this paints an incredibly grim picture of imperial economics. The math seems totally stacked against the average person, against sovereign nations, and ultimately against human survival. Which leads us to the most important question of this deep dive. If this collapse is mathematically inevitable in an extractive system, what is the antidote? How does the sovereign covenantal paradigm actually stop the pale horse from riding?
The syllabus outlines a series of divine legal structures, but again, we have to shift our modern perspective. These laws aren't framed as gentle charity or moral suggestions. They are framed as hard physical economic circuit breakers. And the absolute foundation of this defense is the mandate for honest weights and measures.
The strict biblical prohibition of even va-even.
Yes, even va-even literally translates from the Hebrew to a stone and a stone.
I'm guessing this refers to a merchant keeping two sets of weighing stones in his bag, a heavy stone and a light stone.
Let's walk through how this fraud works. The merchant, the emperor, uses the heavy stone when he is buying raw goods from local producers. So, if a farmer brings a harvest of wheat to market, the merchant weighs it against the heavy stone.
Making it look lighter than it is.
Exactly. This makes it look like the farmer delivered less volume than he actually did, allowing the merchant to chronically underpay for the physical labor.
And then he turns around and uses the light stone when selling that exact same wheat to the consumers in the city. The light stone makes the volume look larger, so he overcharges the buyer.
It is institutional fraud at the base layer of reality. The dual weight trap is the primary tool for systemic commercial deception, allowing the middleman to extract wealth from both the producer and the consumer without adding a single ounce of real value to the wheat.
The syllabus cites Proverbs 16.1 here. A just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are his work.
This is a profound macroeconomic statement. By vesting the authority of weights and measures in unalterable, divine physical law, the covenantal system completely removes the authority to define value from corrupt merchant cartels.
It's the ultimate defense against the white horse's pharmakeia, those spellbinding financial deceptions we talked about earlier.
Anchoring trade to non-negotiable physical realities, which E.W. Bullinger details extensively in Appendix 51 of his companion Bible, eliminates the dual standard. It disarms the price fixing of the black horse's yoke.
Because everyone is using the exact same standard.
Yes. When a measure of wheat and a penny of silver correspond to tangible, unalterable physical realities, the monopolists cannot use fiat debasement or credit manipulation to silently drain the purchasing power of the people. Money must correspond to tangible production.
Okay, so honest weights anchor the currency to reality. You can't cheat the scale. But what about the debt? Even with honest money, people are still going to borrow. Crops fail, emergencies happen, and debt can still accumulate, especially if Neshak interest finds a way to creep back into the system through shadow banking or loopholes.
That is exactly why the covenantal model includes a scheduled systemic reset, a massive circuit breaker called the Shemitah.
The 7-year debt release, Deuteronomy 15, mandates that at the end of every 7 years, there must be a total administrative release of all outstanding debts between citizens.
Yeah.
Now, think about what a total debt wipeout every 7 years would look like today. It sounds completely insane to a modern Wall Street banker.
We often look at the Shemitah through a modern sentimental lens and think of it as a nice charitable welfare program for the poor, but the syllabus frames it entirely differently. The Shemitah is a literal mathematical circuit breaker.
It is the mechanism that breaks the exponential curve of Neshak.
Let's go back to our math. If debt naturally expands at an exponential rate, it will eventually form a massive bubble that suffocates physical production. The Shemitah violently interrupts this mathematical trajectory.
It forces a hard reset.
By forcing the slate to be wiped clean every 7 years, it structurally forbids the credit bubble from ever growing large enough to eclipse the physical economy.
It forces the financial system to take the haircut, to take the loss, before the loss takes down the entire society.
It prevents short-term borrowing from hardening into permanent generational debt slavery. It ensures that the wealth generated by the labor of the people remains with the producers in their local communities, rather than being permanently drained into centralized banking hubs.
Now, it just cuts off the parasite.
The Shemitah literally stops the pale horse in its tracks because the systemic insolvency is never allowed to reach that critical, catastrophic threshold. The math is reset before it can snap.
But the covenant goes even further than the 7-year debt reset. Because debt isn't the only way empires consolidate power, they also buy up all the physical assets, so there is a geographical and asset-based circuit breaker too, the Jubilee.
Leviticus 25. the 50-year land tenure reset.
The law states that the land cannot be permanently sold. The land shall not be sold forever. Every 50 years, all agricultural land, all primary resource estates, must revert back to their original family inheritances.
What's fascinating here is how the Jubilee structurally neutralizes the red and black horses. Think about what those horses do. The red horse uses militarized force to secure exclusive raw material corridors and consolidate agricultural land into massive commercial monopolies.
Right.
The black horse uses that centralized control to manipulate food prices and protect elite land, rents the oil and the wine.
But the Jubilee makes permanent corporatization of the land mathematically and legally impossible.
It structurally prohibits the concentration of agricultural soil and primary mineral wealth into foreign or oligarchic hands. You cannot build a multi-generational monopolistic real estate cartel if the deeds all reset to the native families every 50 years.
It completely dismantles the geopolitical motive for colonization. If an empire knows they can't permanently hold the asset, the incentive for the Red Horse's forever wars evaporates.
Exactly. Why conquer it if you can't keep it?
Why fight a 20-year war to conquer a lithium mine or an oil field if the legal structure dictates it reverts back to the locals in a few decades? It decentralizes the physical assets and guarantees that the sovereign independence of families is prioritized over speculative wealth concentration.
The American system economists like Henry C. Carey echoed this exact philosophy in the 19th century. They argued that a healthy national economy prioritizes domestic enjoyment, high-wage domestic labor, and widespread community stability over the transient low-wage displacement favored by the British free trade system.
So what does this all mean? We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from ancient Babylon to post-war Italy, from apocalyptic horsemen to the mathematics of compound interest. If we step back and look at the entire architecture of this Economics 101 in Bible syllabus, it really is a complete paradigm shift.
The sources present global economic history not just as a sequence of random historical events, but as an epic structural clash between two distinct, irreconcilable operating systems.
On one side, you have the extractive model, the system of Babylon of Tyre, driven by the four horsemen. It is a system powered by Neshak and Tarbit, the serpent's bite of compounding interest and the speculative markup of vital goods.
Yeah.
They use a soft-power legal fiction's pharmakeia, enforced by military swords, to implement a zygos, a yoke of managed scarcity. It relies on the denarius trap to ensure human labor is treated as a cheap, tradable commodity, completely consumed by bare survival, while protecting the elite energy and capital assets, the oil and the wine.
And it mathematically guarantees a catastrophic pale horse collapse when the debt outgrows the earth.
And standing in direct opposition to that, you have the productive commonwealth model, the sovereign covenant. It uses unalterable honest weights, a stone and a stone, to prevent financial deception. It implements divine mathematical circuit breakers, the 7-year Shemitah and the 50-year Jubilee, to wipe out compounding debt and prevent the permanent monopolization of the Earth's physical resources.
It is a system designed specifically, mathematically, to protect human dignity, ensure high wages, and maintain national sovereignty against the systemic violence of the emperor.
It is incredibly dense, but brilliantly cohesive material.
Yeah.
Once you see the framework, it forces you to look at the daily economic news, inflation reports, national debt ceilings, corporate real estate acquisitions through a totally different lens.
Which brings up a thought I want to leave our listeners with today, a final provocation to mull over as they look at that daily news.
Let's hear it.
Modern society largely views perpetual, compounding debt, speculative commodity markets, and massive consolidated corporate land ownership as the hallmarks of a highly advanced, sophisticated financial system. We measure our civilization's success by the expansion of credit and the centralization of assets.
They do, yeah.
But if the ancient mathematical blueprints in this text are right, if Neshak and Tarbit mathematically guarantee a pale horse collapse because finance must eventually outstrip physical reality,
Are we driving a highly advanced machine of endless progress? Or are we just on a treadmill that's accelerating toward an inevitable mathematical breaking point?
I think it makes you wonder if the ancient X-ray machine was never broken at all. We just didn't know how to read the scan.